The creator behind the YouTube channel 401 Files, my guest Ben Walgate, is a passionate researcher delving into the unexplained. His channel focuses on thought-provoking topics such as UFOs, extraterrestrials, Bigfoot and the paranormal. Ben's true passion lies in exploring supernatural hotspots, including the North Yorkshire Moors, where he builds a database of possible encounters with the mysterious and the paranormal. Through his successful YouTube channel, Ben shares his enthusiasm and knowledge of these intriguing subjects. If you're curious about the unknown, his channel is definitely worth checking out.
Growing up, I grew up on a council estate in York. Now, York here, obviously in the UK, is a very notorious place for hauntings. We've had all walks of life there, from Romans, the Vikings, Tudors, you name it. There's been conflicts there throughout all the ages. So it's a very notorious place for hauntings. And, you know, to look at the house where I grew up on this estate, you wouldn't suspect that we lived in a haunted house. It was just like any other house. We were just like any other family living on the estate. But from a very early age, I began to overhear conversations between adults of things that they'd maybe experienced or things that they'd seen that were a bit untoward. Now, at the time, I just didn't think anything of it. I just thought, well, it's adult chat, you know, maybe I didn't know what to think, because at this point in my life, being so young, I didn't really understand what ghosts meant. And then when I was really, really young, I must have been about 4 or 5 years old at this point, my mum was going upstairs. She was going to get in the bath. My brother and sister were both at school, and she said, "Ben, I'll be going to the bath. I'll be locking the door just in case your brother and sister come running back. Do you want me to sit down here and so you can watch TV, or do you want to play upstairs in your bedroom?" And I said that I'll sit down here and carry on watching the TV. Now, my mum went upstairs. She went into the bath, and just like any other kid, maybe about 10-15 minutes later of watching TV, I got really, really bored. I thought, actually, I will go upstairs to play with my toys. So I bent down in front of the TV to turn it off, and it was one of those old-style TVs. You'll probably remember them from back in the day, where they'd speckle, like the static would come up on the screen. And I remember turning the TV off, and I watched the speckles come up on the screen. But when they faded out, there was still something there in the corner of the reflection, like shimmering. And now, roughly in space and time, where this would have been behind me, over my left shoulder, standing at the living room door. And I thought, this is really weird. So I turned the TV on and back off again, watched the speckles fade out, and this thing was still there. Now, the only way I can describe what I saw was like a heat wave. It was white, a brilliant white glowing object, but in the cookie cutter shape of a human. So it had the head, the shoulders, and it didn't look like the feet were on the floor. It was just standing behind me at the living room door. And I decided, I don't know why, I just knew something was off. I knew it wasn't right. And I decided to stand up from the TV and walk backwards without ever looking at the door. Just carried on looking in the reflection and sat back down on the sofa. And as I'm watching this object in the reflection, it's starting to shimmer. And the only way I like to describe this as is a heat wave on a very, very hot day. When you look down the road, you'll see the shimmer of the heat. Well, if you picture that, but vertically, and in the shape of a human, that's what I was looking at. And I carried on watching, and it began to shake more and more violently. And all of a sudden, it started to grow in size. Now, I don't know if it was growing in size within the room, or it just meant that was coming closer to me, whatever it was. So at one point, it felt like it was right on me, and I quickly looked at this whatever it was, and it glided right up into my face. Obviously, you can imagine I was hysterical. Like, I scrambled up the back of the sofa, I kicked all the cushions on the floor, and I ran to the living room door where this thing had just been stood. When I got upstairs, I started to bray hell on the bathroom door, obviously in a state of fear. My mum came out, she was trying to make sense of what was going on, like, have you hurt yourself, are you okay? And I knew instantly from her expression that something wasn't right. You know, the things that I was saying, I've just seen this object float across the floor, and she kind of knew it was what the adults had already been talking about.
Yeah.
And now this is confirmation, Ben's seen something as well. And that was my first ever experience, personally, of my own, of something really, really strange that scared the life out of me. But things gradually progressed in that house. So when you watch the movies, like horror movies and paranormal activity, those kind of films, you'll see that there is a natural progression. Usually someone will see an object in the corner of their eye, objects will move and often turn up in places that have been searched many times before. And this is exactly what we was experiencing in that house. And it got to a point where it even started to talk. And I think out of all the people in the family, my dad probably has the best stories to tell. And I'll retell one now if that's alright with you, Mix. So during this time, my dad was going through a divorce with my mum, and he lived in the house on his own. Throughout the house, he just had new carpets laid in all the rooms. And me, my brother and my sister, we was living with my mum out of the house. And my dad said that he'd gone round one night, locking all the doors, checking all the windows before he went to bed. And he lied there, confident that the house was safe and secure. And the bedroom door pushed against the newly laid carpet is a very distinct sound. You can't mistake that sound. And obviously now the hairs on the back of his neck are standing up. His eyes are really wide, and he's thinking there's someone in the house. Maybe someone's been hiding, I've locked up, and now I'm locked in with an intruder. And my dad's quite a strong guy, you know, he's had some great life experiences, but he said that he's never been so scared in all his life. There was definitely somebody stood at that door. So he lied there with his eyes open, looking at the bedroom window, waiting for the sun to come up the very next morning. Didn't move a muscle. But before he drifted off, he heard pressure being applied on the carpet that stopped at the foot of the bed. So whatever this thing was that had managed to open the bedroom door, it came into the room and stood at the foot of his bed. And yeah, like I say, he just lied there all night waiting for the sun to come back up, absolutely terrified. When he woke up, sure enough, he rolled over, the door was open, and something definitely did push that door open. Now what that was is a complete mystery. But that's just one of many similar stories that took place in the house. There's another incident where my dad heard a voice. He'd come home late from work one night, everybody was in bed, it was like 3-4 in the morning usually. And because he'd been working on the road for very long hours, he used to have to make himself a coffee before he could unwind. So he'd gone into the fridge and bent down to grab the milk when he heard "Gary" over his left ear. It was a female's voice, and obviously his mum had passed away a few months before, so my go-to originally was, well, was it your mum? And he said it wasn't my mum. I know that much, it wasn't my mum. I don't know who this was, but it was clearly a female's voice that knew who I was. And that messed my dad up for a while, because my dad often said to me that the scariest thing about that is that I almost answered it. It was that clear and vivid, I thought it was your mum. So I almost turned around and said, yeah. And the hairs on the back of my neck stood up again. I knew that it wasn't right. When I turned around, there was nobody there. But it was definitely someone who shouldn't be here in this realm, who knew me. And he said that messed with my head. So yeah, very, very active house, a lot of stuff happening for many, many years. I didn't leave until I was 18, until I eventually left to join the army. And people will often say, well, why did you stay so long? You've got to remember, like, my mum and dad were a young couple, three young children living on a council estate. Houses wasn't as easy as it is today just to move out, up the kids into a different school and get a new package. So we stuck it out. And the thing is as well, is that the activity wasn't every single day. Sometimes you would go weeks, sometimes you'd go months with nothing happening at all. But then all of a sudden you'd have a spell of 2 weeks where the house is being turned upside down and, you know, people are getting chased and voices are being heard. It was horrendous like that. So I think that's mainly why we did stick it out. there was times when we'd actually play games with it. So,
Yeah.
so you become confident as well. Like I remember times when, friends, as a young kid, my friends would come round, we'd been to football practice, they'd come round, they'd heard the stories. Oh, get your ghost to do something, get your ghost to, and we'd sit there and we'd say, if there's anybody in this house right now that can hear me, please give us a sign. Nothing would happen. Be more specific. Ask something, ask it a question. Okay, if there's anybody in this house with me right now, please knock 3 times. Sure enough, 3 clear, distinctive knocks. And we'd all freak out, jump off the sofa.
Yeah.
And there was times like that I can remember happening often. And, when I used to finish school, sometimes my mum would be at work. She wouldn't finish for maybe an hour or 2 after I'd finished school. So I'd be back home first. The key would be under the mat. I'd let myself in. And I remember things happening that would freak me out, and I'd end up sitting on the curb across the road, just looking at the house, waiting for mum to finish, because I just wouldn't go back in. It was that bad. Family pets, the dog, terrorized. Looking back now, it must have been an awful ordeal for our dog, because he would growl and scratch at the door and try and escape from things that we couldn't see. But obviously, he knew something was there that we didn't. So.
No, their eyesight's different than ours, isn't it? So
Yeah.
They'll see more than what we see.
Yeah.
So did you ever look into the background, or do you know yourself the background of what could have started this?
Yeah.
Or who this entity, or ghost, or who he was or she was?
So, because my neighbours were quite an elderly couple, they knew the people that lived there before us. And my mum, at her end wits, decided to get the house blessed with holy water. That's how bad this got. Like, we had a priest to come out, and in conversation with the next door neighbour, she'd mentioned that there was an old lady that used to live there called Mrs. Bates. Now, Mrs. Bates was a very religious lady. She used to get a priest who'd come often around to the house and read a sermon from the Bible. They'd have tea and biscuits in the front room. So not someone that you would expect to be chasing young children around a room or terrorising people. But then we later found out that somebody else had died in the house as well. A child had died in the house. And this is where it gets really, really weird, is that Mrs. Bates, the priest that used to come round to speak to Mrs. Bates, he choked to death in the front living room. Mrs. Bates, years and years later, she fell down the stairs, tripped over whatever she was doing, fell down the stairs. Her son, who was caring for her at the time, he never found her for about a week or 2 after, laid there. He came around to check on her, couldn't get the front door open, looked through the letterbox, and that's when he found her at the bottom of the stairs. Now, that's 2 confirmed. There is, like I said, a child, but there's been reports of a child somehow dying in the house, but we just don't know how many have died there. But something else that's really important is the area that we grew up in was called Chapel Fields. Now, if you go back through the history, it was literally that. It was the fields of a chapel.
Right, yeah.
And obviously on the fields of a chapel you have gravestones and burials, so it's probably, endless amount of bodies or spirits.
And you don't know whether them bodies were moved.
Yeah.
Because they do a lot of house building on places like
exactly.
that.
Yeah.
And don't move the bodies.
Yeah.
From what I've found out with some places.
Yeah. And I think, if you really dive into the paranormal side of things, especially with poltergeist activity, you'll find that one of the big triggers is pubescent teens. Now, my sister would have been going through that period of her life. My brother would have been going through that period of his life. And on top of that, as you just mentioned, we was building conservatories, we was knocking walls down. So things like that, it's just fade to the flame, and it's just going to spark whatever's there.
Yeah.
And often we would find that as well. If my mum ever decorated, things would move back to where they were before. Really strange things like that. And I'd say the weirdest one was we'd gone on holiday and we'd come back. We'd been away for 2 weeks abroad somewhere. And when we came back into the house, all the family pictures of every one of us was turned backwards. Now, we took that as a sign as I don't want you here. This is not your house. You don't belong here. And faced every one of us away from the house, so it was very, very weird.
I think that would have been my thoughts as well, coming back to that.
Yeah, I couldn't think of anything else. Like me, as I'm older now, speaking to my parents, that's exactly what they thought, that whatever it was didn't want us there.
Could you tell us your experience the day you was on the outing with school, was it?
It was Cub Scouts, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was an experience later on in life, around about this time now. It's 1997, so I would have been roughly about 10 years old. And I was a real keen member of like the Cub Scouts, being outdoorsy, doing the bushcraft side of things. I really loved it, and I felt at home doing that. It's always been a passion and still is now. So I was always excited about going away on these camping trips, and this one was a big one. It was at a place called Snowball Plantation. It was where all the different Cub Scout groups in the area would meet up for a big camp, and it was a beautiful summer, really red hot days. I remember that distinctively, and the camp itself went great. There was nothing untoward. I didn't feel any weird vibes, or we didn't even really speak about ghosts like around the campfire and stuff. It was just a real nice, chilled environment. But on the way back, we was on a minibus, and the Cub Scout leader had said, we're going to make a random stop in a minute. If anybody wants to jump off the toilet, this would be a good time to do it, because we're not stopping again once we started. So me and my friend, who was sat at the very back, we decided that we'd jump off and go take a pee at the side of the road. Obviously, times are different now. You'd never see that happening, but this is 1997. There's me and my friend stood at the side of the road taking a pee, and I was quite a shy kid, didn't want to stand shoulder to shoulder. So in front of us was a small grass embankment, only a bit higher than probably waist height. But at the top of this embankment was a wooded area. So I decided that I would just push up on top of this little grass embankment. And when I was up there, I was looking through the woods, and I saw a derelict outhouse. It looked like a disused tool shed, but it was made of brick, and it had ivy growing all over it, and there was bricks missing. Certainly not used for many, many years. But the weird thing I remember was thinking, where is the rest of this building? Like, it just doesn't make sense to have a shed on its own in the middle of the woods. So I was scanning around looking for this bigger part of this building, and I saw something move. And what I saw move was a green olive creature from head to toe. It had a very, very small head in proportion to its body. It walked with a stoop. And at the time, I thought maybe it was trying to keep a low profile. But I don't know if it was just so dangly, like so tall, that's naturally how it walked. That was its gait, I'm not sure. But this thing saw me. I saw whatever this thing was. We made eye contact. And it must have only been for a few seconds, but it felt, I can say that it felt weird now, looking back, because I know that's not normal to see such a thing. But at the time, my initial thought was that this was a prank. I stood there and thought, oh, okay, someone's trying to pull the wool over my eyes here. So I very, very quickly thought, I'll do some reverse psychology, and I'll pretend I never saw it. And that way, all their hard work and the joke will be on them. So, yeah, this thing looked at me, I looked at this creature, it put its head down, and it carried on walking without a care in the world in the same direction that it was heading. And, I got back on the bus, and I was expecting all the jibes, people to be going, we got you, we tricked you, and you were scared, but nobody said anything. It was just like nothing had happened. So I thought, I waited it out, and I waited it out, and then when nobody did say anything, I got into my head, all right, maybe my mum knows. My mum wasn't even on the camp. She was picking me up when we got back to York. And she never said anything either. And what's really crazy for me is that memory, that experience, vanished completely from my psyche. And it wasn't even like it was there should I ever need to call on it to tell the story. I just never knew anything about that experience at all for the next however many years until I was in my late 20s, early 30s. And then one day when I was at work, I wasn't thinking about extraterrestrials, I wasn't in conversation or reading a book at the time, I wasn't into sci-fi movies. It just hit me like a ton of bricks, this experience. And, it was as vivid as any childhood memory that I hold. I can remember what flowers were growing through the forest floor that day. I remember how weird its feet looked, pushing against these little white flowers. I remember the way it looked at me, and then looked back down without care and carried on walking. And it just, everything just, and it was quite overwhelming as well. I remember sitting in the office at work thinking, oh my god, like what am I experiencing? Kind of, do you know what I mean? So I went straight online, used the works computer, which I probably shouldn't have done, but I used the works computer and what do you type in? I didn't know what I'd seen. So I just went straight to green man, green creature, weird creature. And lo and behold, it took me a while, but I found something very similar to the creature that I've seen. And it turns out that people all over the world were seeing very similar things, very similar. And at that point then, that kind of hit home for me that this wasn't an illusion, I wasn't, hallucinating. This actually happened, and it felt like it did as well. The feeling was so intense, it was an amazing experience, but I don't know what that thing was doing there. I don't know. My belief is that it was a chance encounter. Some people might say maybe it chose you, and it knew you would be arriving, and you was, I don't know, maybe because of your paranormal experiences as a child, maybe it knew that you was more open to this stuff, and it was waiting. I've had all these things said to me over the years, but for me, I think it was just a chance encounter. I think that we turned up at the side of the road, caught this thing unawares, and maybe startled whatever it was more than it startled me. The only thing I can't get my head around is how it was so calm. How did it know that I wouldn't run back down the embankment screaming to the high heavens that I'd just seen this alien? How did it know? How was it so calm and blasé that it just put its head back down without care and carried on walking? That's always baffled me. And because of that, people have then speculated, well, maybe the time that you experienced was different. Maybe you were stood there a lot longer than you think you was. Maybe, all of these different things then start coming up, and it blows my mind because I will never ever have the answers to any of that, but I know what I saw. And it was a green creature bipedal that doesn't belong on this planet. And if it does, and if this planet is the planet, their home planet, then we've missed huge parts of history, or we're not being told certain things, because I've never seen anything like that before, and I've never seen anything like that since. So
I think you do hear, don't you, the lizard people living underground.
Yeah. And like I said, that day specifically was a very hot day. So if they do need the sun, that would have been the perfect time to come up, because it was a blisteringly hot day. But 1997 as well, Mick, sorry, just to interrupt. 1997, when I looked into this, was a huge year for activity all around me. That's the Phoenix Lights. Yeah. 1980 was the Rendlesham Forest, but from that point onwards, till about 1997, things were happening all over the place. When I looked into 1997, that year, when I had my experience, there's also the incident of the creature. I can't remember the name of it now. It was in Mexico. Have you seen that one? Little creature that they cornered it.
Chupacabra.
It was something like that. Yeah, that was 1997. So there was like a whole explosion of people around the world having these immense sight. It wasn't just lights in the sky. People were seeing creatures on the ground around that time.
I do remember that.
Yeah. And that blew my mind as well, because I was thinking, well, maybe there was like, you don't know, was they sending more to Earth at that time, and it just happened that people were seeing them, or for some reason 1997 was that a year that meant something to them and they were all coming up from their hiding place. I just don't know, but it was it was a great experience, and one that certainly led me on to what I do now as well. So
do you think that with your past experience is with the haunted house, and then seeing that and you're recognising it years after, it coming to your memory then, did that get you onto what you do now, or did you have that interest before that?
Never had the interest before. I mean, the paranormal things growing up, that sparked my interest, but maybe only in terms of now being interested in sci-fi. I was now starting to watch things like Ghostbusters, and Star Wars, because that stuff now was interesting to me, knowing that it can actually be real. Once I saw the reptilian, if that's what we're calling it, this humanoid thing, now I knew that there's more than just the paranormal. Maybe there's other things as well. And in researching what I saw, I realised that there's this other thing, this other phenomena taking place called cryptids. Never heard about cryptids before. And so what I do on my channel, when I get out to investigate these things and explore, is I try to incorporate all of that, because for me that's been my experience. I haven't just had one experience in one genre. I've had weird things happening in different parts of these phenomena, whether it be the paranormal, UFOs, extraterrestrials. I've had really strange things happening, and that tells me that maybe they're all linked, or there is more than just one strange thing happening at a time, you know. So that's why I do it.
I tend to find myself that there seems to be a link between
Absolutely.
all these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, I believe that when I first started off doing the 401 files, my whole thing was that cryptids are cryptids, extraterrestrials are extraterrestrials, and UFOs are a different thing. And now I don't think that. Now I think that some of these cryptids that have been seen might be extraterrestrial in nature. And it might explain why, you know, we have so many Bigfoot sightings and people report mind speak, where they're spoken to telepathically. Now you can cross that over into the extraterrestrial phenomena quite easily. That happens, and it's well reported in that phenomena.
And you did mention before your dad hearing the voice.
Exactly. And bad smells. Yeah. Whenever there's a cryptid sighting, people report awful smells. You know, there's countless UFO abduction stories where people have reported bad smells. The ability to disappear and reappear, that's a crossover from both phenomena. Strange lights are seen in both cryptids and extraterrestrial phenomena. It goes on and on and on. And for me, I don't think they're oblivious to each other. Either the extraterrestrials have the same interest in cryptids as we do, or they're working together somehow. Whether that be sending cryptids here as some kind of a spy to explore our planet, or they are themselves extraterrestrials, the cryptids, you know.
Well, going back to science fiction, when you think of Star Wars, and I always think of Chewbacca as being a Bigfoot type creature.
Absolutely.
You know, working alongside these other species within Star Wars.
Yeah.
You know, I tend to have that in my mind a lot when I'm out there and thinking, you know, are they all working together?
Yeah.
You know? And you do get to a belief where you think, all these entities, are they working together? And they're coming down here and they're coming down taking samples. And we know they take human samples. And we've got the mutilations going on as well. They're taking samples there.
Yeah.
That's if you believe that side of things, you know, that they're coming down and mutilating cattle and other animals.
Yeah.
Because it's the area what they take away, the tongue and all around the jaw area and all that is a tissue that would be used if you was a scientist looking for change of any environment of a planet, really.
Yeah. I recently did a podcast where they were asking me about that, what you just spoke about, and saying, well, you know, I get what you're saying, Ben, about these cryptids might be extraterrestrial, but when we find prints from like a Bigfoot, that's a very human thing. When we see Bigfoot structures, whether it be tree structures or, you know, smashing two clamshells together, these are very human things. So how would that in some people's mind, it's difficult for them to try and believe that could be extraterrestrial. But my thing is this: humans do very weird things, you know. Like, we go across the planet to study the most bizarre of animals, like insects. People will dedicate their life to studying a simple insect, like a butterfly or a caterpillar, ants, myrmecology, for example, the study of ants. People put a lot of time and effort into these things. And yet you could look at us and say, well, we've got airplanes that can fly on the edge of space and drop a bomb on a postage stamp, and, you know, we're driving Formula 1 cars and going to space. So why would we be bothered about this butterfly? But we are.
Yeah.
So when we look at extraterrestrials, there is no rhyme or reason to what they did. For example, Betty and Barney Hill is probably the number one, you know, the first, let's just say, abduction case recorded.
Yeah.
When they got Barney onto the gurney, they were amazed that he had false teeth, and they couldn't understand it. They were all trying to pull these creatures were trying to pull his teeth out because he had veneers in, and they didn't understand why his teeth moved, but Betty's didn't. Now that's a very, you know, you look at that and you think, how can these be a super advanced race and they don't even understand what false teeth are? But it doesn't mean, you know, you can be advanced, you can be super intelligent, but you might have evolved a different way, you know? And so things like that might be fascinating for them, just as insects are for us. So,
that's a good way of putting it.
There is no, when people say to me, you know, but, I mean, for example, you hear it all the time in the comments section on YouTube. why would they fly light years across the galaxy just to get crash out of the sky from a lightning storm, right? And I get what they're saying, because in their mind they're thinking super advanced, intelligent race, all this technology. How would that be possible that lightning can just blow them out? But we don't, the rules that apply here, i.e. lightning striking things, might be the same things that apply to them as well. Just because they're super advanced or intelligent doesn't mean that they're immune to, physics and science. The same rules might apply, and we don't know why they do the things that they do. But they do, because it gets reported time and time again. So obviously we spoke about the paranormal experiences I had growing up, and then obviously my encounter with what was a bipedal creature. And so with family members, the topic of conversation was usually about, weird and strange things. And it was one night at my brother's house, we started talking about some of the events that happened in the haunted house. And around about this time, I was already making little films. They didn't have much talking in them, no talking at all in some cases. It was just music and me walking past the camera, a bit of B-roll. And I was really getting addicted to it, like how creative I could be with it and stuff like that. So my brother said, why don't you make a YouTube channel, and get out there and investigate these hotspots, talking about strange phenomena and see what other people come forward with, and, might meet like-minded people as well. So that to me really appealed. The fact that I could reach potentially thousands, if not millions of people, and get all these different stories from other people around the world coming in, and at the same time do the filming as well. So yeah, I decided to make a YouTube channel, and it's really strange. I actually made a Facebook post about this the other day, of how the name came to be, like the 401 files. People think, what does that even mean? So when we was looking for a name for the channel, my brother was scouring the internet for a cool name for a YouTube channel talking about strange things, and all of a sudden a warning popped up on the screen saying 401 what was it, access denied. And basically it's like an internet code for a site that you shouldn't be viewing, or some corrupt files, something like that. So I thought that's actually really good. Let's call it 401 files, which would mean, access denied of these files. And, 401 files was born. So since then, the channel's grown massively, and people seem to be really enjoying what I'm doing as well. So I like that. Generally speaking about Bigfoot, like in other parts of the world, like the Pacific Northwest, Canada, parts of the US and things like that, for me, it's not too much of a stretch to believe that it could be an undiscovered cryptid, because we just have such wide open expanses of land, a lot of which is still yet to be discovered. So when we talk about Bigfoot in other parts of the world, and people try to convince me that, it is flesh and blood, it is an undiscovered creature, I can get on board with that. It feels more believable to me to accept that, just because of that fact that, the land mass is so different, and the terrain varies massively. So you can imagine, some undiscovered cryptid, some hominoid, walking around in this undiscovered land, living a life of luxury, miles away from anywhere, and going undiscovered for so long. I can actually see that in my mind being a real thing. There are still questions like, why has a body never turned up? Why has nobody really ever killed one of these in their truck or their car? We're left with the usual stuff, the prints, maybe some questionable fur samples. But I still do believe it's possible for a Bigfoot to be roaming somewhere in the world, like I said, Pacific Northwest or the US, and be undiscovered. So yeah, I do believe that. Could it have an extraterrestrial element as well? Absolutely. Just like I talk about here in the UK, it being more extraterrestrial, it could also have that as well. It could be either or, really. So for me, you see, that could explain how they got here. Like you said, the land bridge. But if they are here, for me, they have to be supernatural. They have to be either interdimensional, extraterrestrial, supernatural, one of those things. Because if you look at the smallest of creatures here in the UK, like the dormouse, for example, or the rarest, the red squirrel, it might take some time, but we can go out and we can find and film in 4K any one of those rare creatures here in the UK at any given time.
Yeah.
Now, if we're talking about a creature that's 7 or 8 foot upwards, a huge body mass, very specific requirements, assumably, that it would need to survive, like food and land and water sources, it would be seen. Everybody in this day and age is carrying a mobile phone that's equipped with a camera. There's drones flying around. We have, the wild camping scene now exploding, where people are venturing off into areas that, like you say, Scotland, where they normally wouldn't 10, 20 years ago. So these areas now are becoming smaller and smaller where they can remain hidden. And there is still no sign or quality footage of a Bigfoot creature. And so for me, if it is here in the UK, and I don't doubt as well, I need to mention this, I don't doubt for a second that people are seeing something that resembles a Bigfoot, or if not a Bigfoot itself. But if it is here in the UK, it has to be supernatural, because it's avoiding all of those things and doing really well at it. Now, we can't escape the fact that people are seeing it. So how is that possible? How can it be here where people are having these encounters, but yet it can be here and not be discovered? When every other creature, every other insect here, as we can find, we can film, we can document. Again, I think that for that reason alone, it has to be able to slip in and out from another dimension, or come here from another part of the solar system on a spaceship, or be invisible. Talking about the supernatural and paranormal, it has to have an ability like that when living here in the UK. And it is weird, it is weird because it's conflicting to what I'm saying when we talk about the US. I've just said there that when I talk about the US, I don't have a hard time imagining that it could be flesh and blood, living off the land, undiscovered. It just changes slightly when we come to an island like here in the UK.
Yeah, it's hard to get your head around, really.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
Because, you look at some of these David Attenborough documentaries, or some of these wildlife channels on YouTube. Some of them aren't professionals, they're just hobbyists. And even they can go out and catch the rarest of rarists here in the UK. The red squirrel, the tiny little dormouse. It might take them weeks, it might take them months, but they can get you documentary style quality footage of these creatures. And as I just said, the noose around these areas is closing every single year because of the increase of wild campers and bushcraft enthusiasts. They are venturing out to places that are remote, and just mental health in general has increased, I would say, over the last 20 years, which is making more and more people want to escape society. And they're wanting to push off and live remotely or off the grid. And because of that, someone somewhere would have seen something, would have captured something tangible, and it's not happened. We get the stories, we get the possible print and all these things, but again, that for me is just an indication that it has an ability then to be seen, to come here and disappear at will.
And that puts you back to the reptile that you saw.
Yeah.
The reptilian that you saw, was it chance?
Exactly, yeah.
It's just one of them, it just goes round in circles when you're thinking about these things.
And I think it was, we spoke about this earlier, and I said there that I 100% believe it was a chance encounter. I don't think there was anything special about me. I don't think it knew that it would be me that gets off. It could have been anyone that day on that bus, and they would have been sat here now talking to you. It was just a complete chance encounter. I think what really helped increase that chance of seeing what I saw was the fact that it was a summer's day. Now, if what people say about the reptilians is true, and they do need warm weather, then maybe it came out from wherever it was hiding from, a cavern or a cave or some underground dwelling where, it was a beautiful summer's day, it didn't expect to be seen walking through. Maybe it does that a lot. Maybe just this time around, a bus full of Cub Scouts turns up and one of them decides to come and look through the woods. Maybe it was just, potluck.
Yeah. Definitely. So, moving slightly on from that, in this country as well and all over the world, we start looking at the dogman sightings, the werewolf sightings, whatever you want to call it, which is almost as elusive, but you're getting more and more reports of that in this country than you do Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Do you think that connection, that extraterrestrial connection, is similar to your thoughts on the Bigfoot in this country as well?
Yeah. There's certainly something strange about the UK when it comes to dogman sightings and werewolves.
when you think of, I mean, where you are in Yorkshire, there's a lot of references to werewolves
I was just going
on this side of the country.
Yeah, I was just going to say this. You know, you go back through media, movies and things like that. We've got the American Werewolf in London. There's been countless tales over thousands of years. Folklore is just rich with stories of men turning into wolves and dogmen type creatures. So there is definitely an area there where it has to be looked at. It's not all just folklore and, you know, wives' tales to get children staying close to home. There's more to it than that. It goes back a long time. And again, I just think it falls in the same category. There is something going on. And maybe people are seeing more of these things now because over time our consciousness is changing. And maybe a lot of people now are becoming more aware and more understanding to these subjects, that changes something somewhere. You've heard of the butterfly effect, how one small change can make a big difference somewhere else. You know, if you look back, again, 15, 20 years ago, and you spoke to somebody in the street about UFOs and extraterrestrials, you'd have probably been laughed at. But now we have the media reporting on it like it's like an everyday occurrence. We've got the Pentagon releasing things like it's the norm. But that wasn't the case 10, 15 years ago. Like, things are changing, people's consciousness is expanding. And I think that we aren't stupid now as a society, as a species. We realise that there is more than what we see, feel, and can touch. You know, it's a mysterious world that we live in. Like, you look at the discoveries of science over the last 10 years, things that we've found and discovered, and things that we've debunked and proven to be wrong, that we once believed. It's changing all the time, and I think that because of that, there is an increase with maybe how these creatures are coming across into this realm. Is there a portal opening? Is there a doorway now that they've gained access to? Is this collective consciousness of humanity somehow enabling more of these things to come through? I don't know how it's working, and I don't think we ever will in our lifetime, but it is. As you've mentioned, sightings are increasing. People are having their lives affected with weird things that they can't explain. What's causing that? I would love to know, and that's again why I get out and do these videos. What's the change? We know there is a change. Something's happened because, you know, the spike is forever going up in this direction of people's sightings and experiences. But if we can find out why that is, then that is where we'll find the root of the cause, really, for that. First of all, I'm probably on the spectrum somewhere because I have a really over-imaginative brain. You know, I can be driving to the local shop and no music on, no podcast, and all of a sudden just thoughts of weird things and theories will be flying through my mind, and some of them will capture my attention, and I'm like, wow, that is actually really weird. I've never thought of that before. So I'll take a quick note of it. You know, I'll keep a mental note of that, and that will come out in my video. Or it could be a podcast. You know, they've had a really interesting guest on who's talking about something from a different angle that I've never heard before, and I'll maybe put my own twist on that and elaborate a bit more on what he was talking about. So inspiration for me comes from everywhere. Even my own kids, because they've got such an untouched, pure mind. You know, they're not fed by the news. A lot of these kids these days are on social media, granted, like tablets and stuff, but they're really, what's the word? They're really in tune with the world, and they're questioning everything all the time. When we get older, we seem to stop doing that. We seem to think that we've got it all sussed and figured out.
Yeah.
Kids don't think that way. And so they'll come up to me and they'll ask me questions. Dad, why does this do this? Is that possible? Can this happen? And, you know, that even gets me thinking. And that's a great source of inspiration because, like I've said, it's completely pure. It's not being biased in any way from anyone else's point of view. So they'll talk to me. They know my interests. They'll talk to me about the paranormal and cryptids and things like that. But they'll ask the questions that I've never heard anybody else ask. So, yeah, inspiration for me comes from everywhere. Talking to people like yourself as well, Mick. You know, you're doing your research, which is the same as mine, but it's in a different area.
Yeah.
Now, are we both experiencing the same things, or is there a different scenario going on where you're operating to where I'm operating? And things like that really get the ball rolling for conversation. Because if that is the case, why? Again, we go back to the why. Why is it happening differently in your area? Why is there more of Bigfoot reports in your area than there is my area, and vice versa? But all that inspiration coming in, all these questions flying through my head are what keep me going out there. You know, if I felt like I was getting closer to it and eventually one day got the answers, you know, it's the mystery. I feel that's what keeps me going. The mystery that one day, you know, it's right there, it's right at my grasp, but not yet.
Yeah, it's an addiction as well.
It really is.
You know, getting out there and looking into these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you never know, and like you'll know yourself, when you go out, you never expect to see anything. If we're being honest, we never expect to see anything, we never expect to find anything. But it's always that what if, because we do know 100% that these things are happening. And that alone, always in the back of my mind, says, yeah, but what if? You know, it's likely that you're going to go out there and you're going to sit talking for 5-6 hours, or you might even spend an overnighter talking to the camera and nothing might happen. But you never know, because some people only spend an hour in these areas. I know people that have been hacking on horseback on the North Yorkshire Moors, they've been on some of the mountain bike trails. They don't care about these phenomena. And 1 hour into their experience and their life's changed forever.
Yeah.
And you know, that's what it is for me, is the fact that I know realistically it might not happen, but it does happen. And I want that what if moment. And you can't get that unless you're going out.
No, you've got to be boots on the ground, out there, and spend a lot of time doing it.
Yeah. A lot of us feel like caged animals these days. You know, everything is accessible. You can find out what's going on the opposite side of the world at the flick of a finger. You know, back in the day, if we wanted to listen to music, we'd have to sit there and press record on the tape thing for the radio guy to stop talking, and we'd do it. Now you can have Spotify and you can just pick any song in the world, made at any time in history, and you can listen to whatever you want. Same with movies, with Netflix. Everything is super accessible. And I think that gives us this suffocation feeling. You know, we feel like the walls are closing in a little bit. So most people, as I've mentioned, are wanting to break free. And there's no better place to feel alive than being in the outdoors. So if you've got an interest, like searching for cryptids or, you know, hunting down the paranormal or whatever it may be, and you're also outdoors doing it, that can only be a good thing. So my passion basically lays with the idea that extraterrestrials could be somehow related to the cryptids. You know, I think that is, when I first started out with the channel, like everybody else, I thought cryptids were cryptids, extraterrestrials were extraterrestrials. But being a ufologist, being someone that's interested, you know, in ufology, I've learned over time that UFOs and extraterrestrials, more specifically, can look like a whole range of different things. Like if you think of the Pascagoula case, those extraterrestrials there look nothing like the Bay and Barley Hill extraterrestrials. And, you know, the Allagash incident was very different to, say, the Flatwoods Monster extraterrestrial. They don't look like the stereotypical grey aliens with the big black wraparound eyes. They're very, very different looking. And, you know, if you showed the Flatwoods Monster to somebody who has only ever seen sci-fi movies and said, what do you think that is? They wouldn't say alien. And because of that, that made me start thinking, well, how do we know these cryptids that are being seen aren't extraterrestrial? You know? And because they could come in all shapes and sizes, as I've just showed you there. And that fascinates me. The idea that these different species of extraterrestrials from somewhere else have now found their way here. And people are having those sightings. You know, a dogman, on the face of it, might be a flesh and blood creature. It might be a humanoid hybrid or of some kind, you know, a secret experiment. Or it might just be that there is a species out there that looks like that, you know, of extraterrestrial. It might be that extraterrestrials, as I've said, come in all different shapes and sizes, and they're only now just finding their way here. I love that. That, for me, keeps me really interested. For a long, long time, the little grey aliens took the forefront of what an extraterrestrial was. Now that's changing. You know, people have been abducted from their beds at night, reporting very, very different looking things that don't fit the bill of a stereotypical alien. So I want to know what's going on. I want to find out why that is.
You think they're working together, you know, like all these different species? Well, not all the different species, but some of them are working together, because you've got Whitley Strieber when he's talking about the different entities that take him, how they look to, you know, some that they look completely different.
Yeah, I do believe that. I do believe that they are working together somehow, because a lot of these abduction stories where people are taken aboard a craft, most of them really strange coincidence here, but they all see humanoids or human-looking people, you know, that maybe not quite human. They've got like eyes of a cat, but they've still got 2 feet, 2 legs, a head, that real human appearance. In fact, the Travis Walton case, for example, when Travis was left alone in the room aboard the craft, he turned around and saw what he thought was a human being, so much so that he ran up to him, speaking English, asking for questions. What are you doing with me? Where am I going? What happened? I need answers. He thought this person aboard this craft was an actual human. Now, was it a human? We don't know. But humans and weird creatures aboard these craft are always reported. This is a very, very common thing. There's different avenues that you can go down with this. You can look at that and think maybe the military or the government are part of some kind of top secret, you know, assignment or project, and we know more about the extraterrestrials than we're letting on. And in actual fact, we've been working with them for many, many years. That could be one thing. It could be that somewhere out there in the far reaches of the galaxy, there is a planet where humans and extraterrestrial beings coincide. A bit like Star Trek or Star Wars.
Yeah.
And, you know, that fascinates me. Why is that? And are they humans? Or are they hybrids? What is going on? Why is it that humans are being seen working alongside extraterrestrials? And just to go into that further, if you remember the Gary McKinnon case, a very, very famous case where the British hacker then hacked into NASA, he brought up files on the NASA software called non-terrestrial officers. And in this file he found in NASA was a long list of military personnel names, but the title of the folder was non-terrestrial. Now, does that mean that we are working with these extraterrestrials? Because another file he found was called ship-to-ship transfers. Now, when Gary did a background check on some of these coded ship names, they were part of no naval fleet known here on Earth. So, does that mean ship as in spaceship out in space? Are these non-terrestrial officers, you know, here on Earth working with the government, the military? And is there some kind of a exchange taking place? You know, I don't know what that could be. I don't know what it is, but there seems to be a connection between aliens and humans.
I don't know if you've heard of a fellow called Rick Allen.
Yeah.
And his idea, where there is planets out there with humans who are sort of like splicing different genes to form cryptids, and they use them as the soldiers.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
I don't think it's too far-fetched. It sounds, on the face of it, sounds really far-fetched, but have you ever read the Lacerta files?
I've heard the interview.
Yeah. So the actual document that you can find on the internet, it's quite difficult now to find it, but I might actually have a copy that you can have, Mick.
Yeah.
I highly recommend anyone to read that, because it goes into such detail that, you know, even if you're the most hardened skeptic, you have to look at that and think, how the hell do they know this information? If that's some guy writ those files, you know, as a prank or whatever, he needs to win some kind of an award for being the best author, because it is an amazing piece of work. And again, the Lacerta files is about a reptilian who meets a human here on Earth, and they're here as part of an exchange program to study humans. But what she says in that file is that they've always been here. Earth is not our, it's not our home planet. And I do believe this to some degree, I believe that humans maybe have come from somewhere else. This isn't our first rodeo. We've been on other planets before. And before we arrived, there were other species already here. So I do believe that. I do believe that maybe there are other planets, hundreds if not thousands, where human-looking people, our species even, Homo sapiens, are living alongside extraterrestrials.